Picasso is probably most famous for the money, the women, the fame, but that's not why he's important. He's important because he made amazing art that really transformed the 20th century.
Born in southern Spain in 1881, Pablo Picasso began his life as a child prodigy and ended as one of the most renowned artists of his century.
He was classically trained, yet he became very groundbreaking for his time.
Picasso's family moved to Barcelona in 1895, where he entered the La Jonga Art School. At the age of 13, his talent was already apparent.
Even as a young man, he had this reputation of being able to take anybody's forms, anybody's paintings, and turn it into a Picasso.
In 1900, Picasso started painting scenes of clowns, vagrants, and prostitutes, all in tones of blue. Later, this would be known as his Blue Period.
The Blue Period is in part about being depressed, but it's also in part about using a technology that was kind of foisted on him because it was so cheap when he was very poor.
Picasso's move to Paris in 1904 began his transition to his Rose Period, with more brightly colored paintings often using a pink tone.
He's more optimistic in Paris. He begins to find people who will buy his paintings and dealers who are interested in him.
In Paris, Picasso met Gertrude Stein and her brother Leo, Americans, who would become his principal patrons in Paris.
Gertrude Stein and her brother really transformed Picasso's career. The Steins introduced him to the avant-garde. That's when he realized that he needed to radically change his game, and he stepped up to the plate.
Picasso's portrait of Stein reflected his study of African, Roman, and Iberian masks.
Stein looked at it and said, "But Pablo, it doesn't look like me." And he said, "Yes, Gertrude, but it will." And he was right. She grew into that picture, and it's become the image we all remember.
It was in 1907 that his painting, Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, and the mask-like faces of the women, first seen in the Stein painting, paved the way for Cubism, the style that Picasso developed in collaboration with Georges Braque.
When Georges Braque saw Picasso's art, he said, "It's like he wants us to drink gasoline and eat fire." He was really appalled. But then he really came over to Picasso's side. When Braque and Picasso invented Cubism together, they were doing something utterly unprecedented, and they must have been terrified. They were making pictures that looked like no kind of art that had ever been made before. But in a matter of just a few years, Cubism served as a kind of catalyst that radically transformed avant-garde all over the world.
By 1918, Picasso's long-standing financial troubles were behind him, and his wealth and fame continued to grow. That year, he married a ballerina named Olga Kokolova. The two lived in a state of constant conflict.
Picasso and Olga were on the verge of getting divorced in 1932, and it turned out that she would have had the right to half of everything he owned. Now, he didn't mind losing the money, but the idea of giving away half of the paintings and sculptures he'd made was too much for him to bear.
But Picasso continued to paint, creating hundreds of masterpieces before his 45th birthday. In 1927, Picasso began an affair with 17-year-old Marie-Thérèse Walter.
He approached a beautiful young woman on the street one day and announced that he was Picasso and the two of them were going to make great art together, which sounds like a really dumb come-on line, except that it turned out to be true.
In 1937, Picasso created Guernica, depicting the bombing of a Basque village during the Spanish Civil War.
He took imagery from his own private life and he transferred that into an image of a town under bombardment. And this combination of the personal and the political made the most powerful political painting of the 20th century.
During World War II, Picasso remained in Paris while the Germans occupied the city. He continued to paint, producing famous works such as The Still Life with Guitar.
Picasso is interested in the guitar and the way the guitar was like a human body.
His later work spanned multiple styles, from surrealist to neoclassical to pottery. No single technique or medium could contain Picasso's boundless energy, and his artistic experimentation never ceased until his death in 1973.
He was a true artist, somebody who was searching his whole life. He was always trying to be better. He was a pure genius.
He was magical in the sense of being able to turn anything into artistic things. He is the greatest artist since Rembrandt.
Picasso was like the Thomas Edison of modern art. He invented things that were incredibly important in their own right and provided examples for other artists so that they really transformed 20th century art.